Alright, hello guys, and glad to have you on board again today. We are going to have to talk about Solana, and the reason why I do this is because, well, it might not necessarily be visible to most people out there, just being solely focused on the USD price of the assets. But Solana has just closed, or is about to close on a weekly basis, in an all-time high, meaning surpassing 2021's market top above $80 billion back in the days. So here we are. That's really an important landmark which we're crossing, and therefore I think it's worth it to kind of do a deep dive review of where we are, where we stand, what are the fundamentals supporting such a raise, and does it really worth all the excitement I see here and there. Yesterday we've released another video regarding these retail speculation metrics and the kind of speculative cycle that can be driven when there's too much retail implication on asset trading, which is definitely the case for Solana. This video is worth looking at if you didn't. Anyway, despite that, let's go straight to the point. So the reason for this video is, of course, this: as we are crossing fundamental levels, okay, we are in fundamental level timeframes here, we are multi-years in, which means crossing this all-time high itself on a weekly basis is a strong signal. It's something that we just can't undermine by just rough speculation and stuff like that. It could be definitely short-term speculation, but if we're crossing those longer-term targets, something might be supporting this. So this is the reason why, when I looked out there and done my own due diligence on the project, I uncovered so many red flags, and I see no one just talking about it. So I felt very concerned about kind of investor safety and investor protection mechanisms in here, which is something that I generally do here. So I felt like it was worth it to sound the alarm and just say, I'm not going to necessarily criticize only on the project. There might be some very worthy stuff happening out there. But the thing is that just doing some basic regular due diligence uncovers some massive shaded gray areas to the story. So we really want to be doing this. Remember that I'm not just going to go stupidly criticizing a token. So if you are heavily invested into Solana, of course, you're going to say, who the fuck is this guy? He's just criticizing my big baby. So please don't do this. The thing that I'm going to be doing in here is proposing solid arguments, and I will open, of course, the discussion to just counter-argument this. So if for whatever reason anything that is proposed in here is either false or inaccurate, please feel free to reach out in the Discord and get contact me, and I'll be very happy to confront our arguments, discuss, debate, and if it ends up that I said misappropriate information or misleading information, I will either correct that in the description in here, and if the misleading information is so big, I would eventually even turn down this video and record another one. So this is really an open discussion. I'm not just criticizing openly, just saying, out of what I say, I see out there, which is just, well, plain vanilla, okay? It's all going to go up, it's great. No, if I uncover some of those fundamentals presented out there, lots of things are much more contrasted than they are presented as. So here's what we're going to be doing it today. Crossing the all-time high, does the fundamental of Solana actually follow suit? And always pay attention to this. We are in fundamentally longer time frames in here, which means the price itself can go wherever the fuck it wants. One thing is for sure, that we know that over time, nothing is ever derived for a value for a long period of time. We've experienced that actually with Solana itself in 2021, and we'll get through that history. As we're crossing this level today, we're going to paint a picture of what it looked like when we were pricing it at $80 billion in 2021. Does those metrics significantly improve today to justify crossing over those levels or not? What are the fundamentals supporting the recent speculations and all of this? Okay, so as we start, first things first is, well, Solana 2021 has been an absolute shit show, frankly speaking. It went up absolutely crazy, dramatically up. It has sounded the alarm for some investors like me back then, say that, well, something doesn't feel right. It sounds pretty fishy back then. As you can see, even the crypto total 3, which is the rest of all coins taken out of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and also removed USDT, and I could also remove USDC in this equation because I don't need that much history, but that's really the way to go. Okay, if we do this, we'll see that Solana is a strong overperformer. Even it was already back then as well. It's gone vertical where the rest of the market not necessarily did. So it was the headliner back then. Very fishy type of price structure back then. For those who are studying value, it was clear evident that something wasn't right. And we discovered everything about it. Back in the late stages of this thing, well, we somehow figured out that it was all fake. That out of the 10 billion TVI DeFi in the Solana ecosystem, 7.5 billion were totally fake. So basically 75% of the TVL was plainly non-existent. It was just the same kind of collateral rehypothecation between fake DeFi protocols, and basically two guys were behind that scheme. So just two guys faked 75% of the Solana's TVL, and we just discovered that. The other pinpointed stuff is that, of course, like I said, scams and conmens always get figured out. It rarely takes more than 2 years when prices have gone through the roof in outrageous speculative territory. They always go back to the real value because we rarely can hide the true data for more than 2 years. So it took us quite some time to figure out that these guys were faking TVL. But we also took some time to figure out that most of the actual demand pressure on the price and the token was an immobilized supply and a manipulative demand based on FTX Alameda kind of weird in-bed shit. It was basically, remember that this guy was trading with someone else's money, he leveraged it so dramatically, and Alameda's researcher was so heavily into Solana's ecosystem, actually didn't even was paying any attention to the risk factor, meaning they weren't even liquidated when they were wrong. So it was just, oh boy, back in the old days. So everything was kind of fake. Both the TVL, the TPSs, all of these things were fake back in 2021. And people just bought into the narrative. The Solana was the Ethereum killer, and turns out it wasn't. And that was the plain reality back in the day. Now all of these things are very well documented. They are not hidden from general public. And this is not tinfoil hat stuff. It's just really some journalist well-documented stuff just proving it all. I mean, this isn't an invented story, okay? It was all fake back then. People bought into it and the reality hit at us very hard. To the point that even the blockchain take down multiple times in the past. During this bear market, investors removed their money out of this. It could have been a dead chain. Truth is, it woke up. So it's really questioning once again due to the reality of this thing, because it's basically just 6 months old. It's just been revived out of nowhere, and we're going to study the reality of those narratives this time around, because we're crossing over what was totally fake back then. So are we really coming up for something solid this time around, or is it just yet another pump and dump in which we're going to discover the underlying primitives being faked? So here it is, all right? The reality out of this is that back in 2021, the fake narrative was all around kind of Ethereum killer. It was basically Ethereum can't scale, or at least not for now. It has scaling problems, and therefore came like the white horse in here. Yeah, I can process millions of TPSs and stuff like that. Though basically, this is the Sol scam's biggest lies, or this is the Solana's biggest lies. Basically, people were faking out TPSs, arguably saying that Solana can process 5,000, 10,000, 20, 100K TPSs and stuff like that. Though truth is, it's absolutely false. The second thing is that this chain actually doesn't process any such a thing as thousands of TPSs. It's actually propagating transactions for votes. So you need to understand how the blockchain operates itself. And there's no easier way to understand that the communication overhead is to say, in a consensus algorithm, all validator needs to propagate the informations between them. And the more validator there is, the more information overhead is going to process. And this thing scales exponentially. Because if you want to reach out finality, that means one way or the other, all the validators would have to communicate with each other, either directly or indirectly with some mathematical schemes. So that's really the way to go. This is propagated information. It's kind of similar type of architecture that's been happening for Avalanche as well. But the truth is in these systems still have to communicate information between the peers. And the way it's done with Solana is that they decided to use the on-chain block space to do this. Basically, validators propagate the information using the chain itself. That's a very clever way to do this, but it should never be counted as a TPS. It's just basically information propagation system. So when people misleadingly used it as a TPS counter against Ethereum's ones, if we were to compare these two in parallel, we would have had to compare the Ethereum's TPS, including communication overhead between validators. Basically, we operate validators as well in Cosmos ecosystem, and therefore we connect with all the peers, and we send messages to each other multiple times in each block propagations. So the thing is that if we were to count that as well in Cosmos, we would be processing more transactions in Solana. So that's basically full of shit. So the reality is that these TPSs are not real transactions. And now it's been forced upon this to say, yeah, remove or at least give us the numbers of those vote TPSs. So the real TPS on Solana is closer to 700. So it isn't as fancy as people forecasted it to be back then. So it was almost, once again, misleading information being interpreted by investors not really making their due diligences, just saying, yeah, this thing is so fast, it's so great. No, it's not. And it's really problematic because most of the remaining TPS that you see here are not real users' activity. And we're going to uncover this in a second. So the truth is that even back in 2021, the picture was already much more shaded gray than it appeared to be in the reality. If you just dig below the surface, there was lots of problems, which kind of raised the first question. Does this thing really worth $80 billion back in 2021? I would arguably say the answer was no. It was over speculation, collapsed by the pop of 97% collapse after this. Now, the collapse itself might not have been necessarily worth it. It means the average value of Solana could actually be rising, definitely, but it is amplified by those rough speculation, both creating stupid narratives, retail investors in, and then, of course, we collapse everything, it forces us back down to value, which is what we explained in the video regarding this and the Wall Street cheat sheet model. So, are we in another cycle in which we create rough derivation from the real value and so on? That's the question we're going to answer now. The answer is we're going to have a look at the fundamentals. So back in 2021, we were faking out the TVL, trying to play the fake until you make a game against Ethereum. So basically, it was an Ethereum killer, trying to compete with Ethereum into creating fake TVL and stuff like that. As we can see, the reality is that, of course, this thing collapsed afterwards. So today, as we're challenging these all-time highs again, we would see that the TVL is still nowhere to be found compared to 2021. Okay, and remember that back then the TVL was fake. So today we're crossing over levels with not nearly half of the existing TVL that was accounted back then. We see the correlation between the two was actually significant, which means most of the inherited market cap was coming out of the TVL itself. And as it went up, yeah, congratulations, we're getting closer to the sun. But as the reality kicked in, it of course fell back down to earth. So that's the reality. We see that stablecoin is also a metric that's been absolutely collapsed after the actual real events unfolding one after another. And the truth is that now, as you can see, price has significantly anticipated the rise in TVL. The rise in TVL and stablecoin is there, so don't get me wrong, there is still a rise in activity, but it is far unpaced compared to the actual TVL's rise, to the actual market cap rise. So something's really fishy out there. That means it's probably coming out of something else. The second thing that is really, really fishy is to see that back then another metric was correlated was the number of developers. Kind of coming back from earlier stages of Solana ecosystem, there were somewhat like 20, 30 developers or so. When we were raging at the top of the bull market, we went right up to 161. I'm going to give you the number. So 161. So basically, there was a 4 to 5x multiplication in the number of core developers for the protocol, for the blockchain itself, sorry. But the thing is that, of course, as we can see, this one was correlated to price, fell right back down to earth, back down to same old like 20 or 30, okay? Or 30 plus. Now the problem is that today, market cap has gone right back up, but the numbers of developers is still down. I mean, we still have less than 40 devs to this day. So this is still very concerning to me. That's one of the factors that I would like to see improve very quickly to support the thesis that true activity and genuine stuff is actually going on in the chain. Now, the second thing that we need to see is that there's an underlying factor that is supporting the current market cap rise, and that's actually volumes. If you put that one into the equation, it might be the one supporting the rise. As you can see, the correlation between price and volumes is significant. That means this time around, it might not be tied to TVL, But the actual anchor for the actual market cap raise that we see now is, and could potentially be, very highly correlated to volume increase. So as you would see, the volumes back then were absolutely non-significant. The transactions, the volumes of transactions in USD terms back then was very, very narrow. Though as we've seen, this is not an increase in TPS. It isn't the number of transactions. It's the collateral value of transactions being sent into the blocks. So into this, you would see that there was roughly $32K exchanged a day on the actual blockchain. Now today, we have risen to $1 billion transacting on the blockchain on a daily basis. It's even faster than that today. We're actually roughly approximating 2.5 billion to these days. So this is really what's behind the market raise today. This is the transaction volume, the volume of transactions in dollar terms circulating in the blockchain. So is it a legitimate kind of thing? Or is it just yet another pump and dump scheme, created artificial TVL like back then, is now creating fake transaction volume? Well, here it goes. So this is not the kind of shittiest magazine out there. This is really Cointelegraph, so serious folks out there have been making a bit of research. Published February 2020, 23rd of February, so pretty recent, by the way. All the data is sourced in here, so for you to underline these things and have a look at diving into the numbers yourself, I sincerely invite you to do this. Well, the truth is that some research analytics have been uncovering that the recent surge into USDC transfers are very, very suspicious, to say the least. So most of the actual volume that we see today could be absolutely faked once again. Just like back then we were faking out TVL, this time around we would be faking out volumes of transactions. Basically bots arbitraging between dexes, creating fake transactions which actually don't necessarily move real value but just transfer it at a crazy high pace, trying to arbitrage between dexes. So this is the reality that they've uncovered. Personally, I've looked at the data as well, and this is really a compelling sort of evidence that just says, once again, this is full of shit. Just like 2021 was all about the FTX con man and some other people faking out the TVL in here by creating fake numbers for people to base their narratives upon. Just like, look at those TPSs, which are not transactions but block propagation informations. With transactions on top of course, but seriously, more than 7 or 85% of those transactions per second announced were actually those block propagations. So this is really, really concerning. So, I mean, 85% of the TPSs were fake, 75% of the TVL was fake. Basically, we have created valuations on fake metrics. And as we've seen back then, pumping it all up together with someone who was buying with someone else's money and leveraging the bets ended up creating where we were to $80 billion Solana in 2021, falling right back down to earth violently in a following bear market. Now to this day, where the bull market hasn't even started and we're already creating the next narrative for Solana, that's the chain to be, that's where the airdrops are, whatever, that's where the users are, that's where the transactions are shipped. Well, this is where the value is being transacted. Where truth is, the value isn't transacted there, it's just a bunch of bots, and there are lots of people actually creating those bots very easily. So you can see this, how easy it is to create a sniper bot in Python, building in Solana. So congratulations, folks. This is just an outrageous ecosystem. Basically, there's no real value being built into this. There is some, don't get me wrong, but most of it is just full of shit coins being arbitrated into dexes, which volumes are absolutely bonkers, created by robots creating both fake transactions or useless transactions with outrageously fake volume representations of value being transferred in the system, which actually turns out this is just dex arbitrages, moving it there, and then putting it right back down to the original place afterwards. This is just crazy shit. I mean, if you look at Solana's activity, it's basically Jito first. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is just a couple of days ago, or a couple of weeks ago, Jito just turned down their kind of mempool emulation. They were making tremendous revenue out of this, and it turns out it was just all of another scam. So what happened to Jito just revealed that to me is, well, basically what happened to Jito is that the mempool itself they were trying to create to arbitrage liquidity turned out to be arbitraged itself, aka the wild robot game that is playing on into Solana, creating all of those transactions in fake volumes, we're actually attacking a protocol itself that was trying to do this itself. So that's just, oh boy, incredible stupidity. They had to stop this thing because it was detrimental to the user activity. So if you look at this candle, it just revealed the reality of what this blockchain is all about. Full of shit tokens, meme coins all over the place. There is some legitimate activity beyond that, but it's just a fraction of what really is there. The thing that is supporting the rise in market cap is actually just back in 2021 fake TVL, is the fake volume created by robots who are in turn creating fake transaction activity on the chain. So this is just fake off. And I very well challenge all the listeners in here to prove me wrong and to just get me the right perspective. Because as a professional investor, I've done my due diligence on the project. And, well, just looking below the surface, all I've seen is that the size of the above surface iceberg just doesn't even correlate to whatever happens below the surface. So something's catchy in here, something's very fishy. I see a lot of speculation, and I understand that speculation doesn't necessarily mean that when the retailers are trading, they're not necessarily making their professional due diligence and stuff like that. They're not doing their own research. They're just piling into the momentum. And I do understand that as a professional trader. I know how powerful narratives and market momentum can be against an unexperienced human being in trading. So I understand the speculation. I'm not saying Solana will collapse immediately or whatever. It can go higher. It can go much higher. It can do whatever the fuck it wants. All I'm saying in here is that there's a ticking time bomb below the surface. The fundamentals are probably fake. Most of them are actually. And this kind of system that was in place in 2021, the fake it till you make it, didn't make it in 2021. The reality came right back to us, eating straight into the face. Now I think we're starting it all over again by just a much more complicated scheme, but it doesn't take too much time to really uncover the truth here. So I'm really questioning all this kind of retail craze into this. Are we just once again getting straight up into another carnage? I think it is. Just like there's one missing piece to this puzzle, and I think I would uncover this by mentioning Jump Capital. I mean, Jump Capital just, to me, raises so many red flags in terms of due diligence. It sounds so much like they're probably pumping this ecosystem. They're behind everything I hear about Solana and so on. They have a perfect profile for being FTX again. Well, not necessarily the same story, just probably a bit more complicated. I mean, just fits the profile of these guys. So just be very cautious with that once again. I'm just sounding the alarm just to say, I think the story is repeating once again. It's just a slightly more complicated manner, but frankly speaking, it doesn't take any more than 15 minutes to uncover the truth. So I'm very well concerned that no one is doing its due diligence correctly. Once again, people are piling up like crazy into narratives, and I'm very concerned. So if you thought about investing into Solana, well, if you did in the bottom, well, oops, sorry. So yeah, if you bought at the lows and have very cheap price per tokens, I see no problem with you playing the narrative and just kind of letting it ride until its end. That's really the way to go, I would say, in a strategic way of allocating capital. But the truth is that now I'm very much concerned about the speculative rages that I see now as we approach and close above a level that we've reached out in 2020 was already fake back then. We're even going higher in stupidity today with not actual real value being built behind that. So I'm very, very concerned of that cycle repeating once again, of that VC chain selling very expensive tokens to retails. And the same story, the retails piling in like crazy because they don't look for the real information themselves. So that's the reason why I'm recording this. If you know about anyone who's thinking about just, yeah, I don't understand, but I don't want to give part of it, I just want to be in it. Well, you're probably buying into something that's very sketchy, probably not backed by real data, probably fabricated. And like I said in the introduction, I am not porting rough accusation without data points suggesting this. Some of the things that I say here, if they are ever false, and if you have true evidence of me saying something wrong here, reach out to me. I'll be happy to discuss, and I will discount my own sayings if what I said is false. If you have evidence of wrong assessments in here, come and talk to me. All right? So that's really the way to go. My standpoint in here is not, I don't gain anything for Solana going up or Solana going down. I don't have it in the portfolio. I don't want to have it. I bought it on the lows and I took my profits way before this thing raged to the prices which we're in today. I found this to be sketchy for a long time now, and I think now that we're reaching out all-time highs, I'm starting to get concerned for investors jumping in without proper research. So I wanted to present some information, and now here it is. You guys do your own research. You will have all the things you require for this. Look for those Cointelegraph posts and stuff like that. Verify that information yourself and understand that at the crazy high valuations which we're in today, okay, the real thing is that it's going to be hard for them to hide that much longer. Remember that when you're dealing with billion, 100 billion type valuations, you're not playing in the same game. It's not just the retails where their few $1,000s are going to lift up the price endlessly. When the big guys will start taking profit because they're sooner or later going to figure out what I just said, it's not going to be pretty. So don't be someone else's exit liquidity. That's the message in here. And most importantly, if you have some staggering gains in Solana today, don't forget the partial profit take. That's the lesson. To recount for this, have a look at the previous video in which I explain every reason behind that thing. It's really only speculation at that stage. And like I stated previously in the introduction as well, two things will come out of this. Either one, that means the valuations are unsustainable, prices can go wherever the fuck they want, but if the value doesn't follow suit, we're gonna come crashing back down to earth one more time. The second argument to this is that some of what I just did here is really fake until you make it, but it's also possible that it makes it, which means out of this stupid speculation, some real genuine activity will come out of this and somehow fail it, and somehow end up making it in the end, and to create real value for this chain in a distant future. But remember that time is a constraint in here. These kinds of price manipulation can rarely last without underlying value for more than a year or a couple of years at best. So time is ticking for Solana. Prices have anticipated this activity to be created. It rather would like to be, because otherwise, well, speculation will just automatically collapse on itself. The real activity isn't yet there from what I've seen, so either it's going to come in the following month or quarters, but time is ticking. So be very cautious with that. If you have already invested in Solana or thinking about doing it, timing is going to be a crucial part of your trade. And that's really why I would tend to say it. Solana is a trade. Solana isn't an investment. So long as you put a time constraint into your money, means you need to be carefully assessing your ins and outs. And that's something that some other projects don't necessarily have. If you're building legitimate long-term value, you don't necessarily need that time constraint. That's the reason why I'm an investor, not necessarily a crypto trader. For crypto traders, well, do what you do best, trade. But always remember that a good trade is not necessarily going in, it's also being good at getting out. Bye, guys.